All right, welcome to another reading of Sermons by Robin. This one is actually a two-parter, but it will be split up between 2 weeks, of course, or rather really 1 week, because, well, Tuesday, Saturday. Okay. Um, anyway, so this one is titled "How God Chooses." Okay, so this is part one of How God Chooses. This sermon was written by my late father, Dr. Robin A. Riggs. And it was written for Sunday morning, June 1st, 1997, for the First Church of God in Allegan, Michigan, and it was adopted from a Chuck Swindoll something by him. When I figure that out, I will make sure that it is written in the notes section. Okay. So our text today is from 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 13 and 14, and then we skip to what God says in chapter 16, verse 1. Okay. 1 Samuel 13 through 14. Okay. It says, "You acted foolishly," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." And then we jump to 16:1. And it says, "The Lord said to Samuel, 'How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king.'" Paperclip to save that spot. Probably will need it later. Okay. Whoop. Turns out we also need Psalm 78. So let's go to Psalm. It's got several that he once read here at the beginning. Nope, that's 81. That's 79. This is... Oh. Well, this is going to be long. Okay. Psalm 78 says, "O my people, hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter hidden things, things from of old, what we have heard and known, what our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done. He declared he de- he decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our forefathers to teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn will tell their children. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commands. They would not be like their forefathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, whose hearts were not loyal to God, whose spirits were not faithful to him. The men of Ephraim, though armed with bows, turned back on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant and refused to live by his law. They forgot what he had done, the wonders he had shown them. He did miracles in the sight of their fathers in the land of Egypt. Oh, bumblebee. In the region of Zone. He divided the sea and led them through. He made the water stand firm like a wall. And yes, that was the bumblebee that I saw that just tried to smack me in the face. Anyway, he guided them with the cloud by day and with light from the fire at night. He split the rocks in the desert. He gave them water as abundant as the seas. He brought streams out of a rocky crag and made water flow down like rivers. But they continued to sin against him, rebelling in the desert against the Most High. They willfully put God to the test by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the desert?" When they struck the rock, water gushed out, and streams flowed abundantly. But can he also give us food? Can he supply meat for the people? When the Lord heard them, he was very angry. His fire broke out against Jacob, and his wrath rose against Israel, for they did not believe in God or trust in his deliverance. Yet he gave a command to the skies above and opened the doors of the heavens. He rained down manna for the people to eat. He gave them the grain of heaven. Men ate the bread of angels. He sent them all the food they could eat. He let loose the east wind from the heavens and led forth the south wind by his power. He rained meat down on them like dust, flying birds like sand on the seashore. He made them come down inside their camp, all around their tents. They ate till they had more than enough, for he had given them what they craved. But before they turned from the food they craved, even while it was still in their mouths, God's anger rose against them. He put to death the sturdiest among them, cutting down the young men of Israel. In spite of all this, they kept on sinning. In spite of his wonders, they did not believe. So he ended their days in futility and their years in terror. Whenever God slew them, they would seek him. They eagerly turned to him again. They remembered that God was their rock and God most high was their redeemer. But then they would flatter him with their mouths, lying to him with their tongues. Their hearts were not loyal to him. They were not faithful to his covenant. Yet he was merciful and forgave their iniquities and did not destroy them. Time after time he restrained his anger and did not stir up his full wrath. He remembered that they were but flesh, a passing breeze that does not return. How often they rebelled against him in the desert and grieved him in the wasteland. Again and again they put God to the test. They vexed the Holy One of Israel. They did not remember his power, the day he redeemed them from the oppressor, the day he displayed his miraculous signs in Egypt, his wonders in the region of Zon. He turned their rivers to blood. They could not drink from their streams. He sent swarms of flies that devoured them and frogs that devastated them. He gave their crops to the grasshopper, their produce to the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail and their sycamore figs with sleet. He gave over their cattle to the hail, their livestock to bolts of lightning. He unleashed against them his hot anger, his wrath, indignation, and hostility. A band of destroying angels. He prepared a path for his anger. He did not spare them from death, but gave them over to the plague. He struck down all the firstborn of Egypt, the firstfruits of manhood in the tents of Ham. But he brought his people out like a flock. He led them like sheep through the desert. He guided them safely so that they were unafraid. By the sea, but the sea engulfed their enemies. Thus he brought them to the border of his holy land, to the hill country his right hand had taken. He drove out nations before them and allotted their lands to them as inheritance. He sent the tribes of Israel in their homes, or settled the tribes of Israel in their homes. But they put God to the test and rebelled against the Most High. They did not keep his statutes. Like their fathers, they were disloyal and faithless and unreliable as a faulty bow. They angered him with their high places. They aroused his jealousy with their idols. When God heard them, he was very angry. He rejected Israel completely. He abandoned the tabernacle of Shiloh and the tent he had set up among them. He sent the ark of his might into captivity, his splendor into the hands of the enemy. He gave his people over to the sword. He was very angry with the inheritance. Fire consumed their young men, and their maidens had no wedding songs. Their priests were put to the sword, and their widows could not weep. Then the Lord awoke as from a sleep, as a man wakes from a stupor of wine. He beat back his enemies, and he put them to everlasting shame. Then he rejected the tents of Joseph. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. He built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he established forever. He chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep, he brought him to the shepherd, to be the shepherd of his people, Jacob, of Israel, his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them. Okay, and then we're going to go. Oh, that's where that paperclip went. I was looking for that earlier. Okay, then we're going to go back to 1 Samuel. Oh, I already read 16:1. No, no, is it? Let me just double check. It says 16:1 again. I just want to make sure that we're not talking about another psalm passage here. Sorry, lots of pages. Hmm. Well, it's a Psalm of David, and it says, "Keep me safe, O God, for in you I take my refuge." So that could be. All right, on to the meat. God spoke to Abram in the land of Chaldea, calling him to a new life in a new place, promised to bless him and through his offspring to bless the whole world. Eventually, God placed Abraham's great grandson Joseph over the land of Egypt. There was intense famine, and Abraham's descendants moved to Egypt, and then they multiplied greatly. Egyptians feared them and made them slaves, but God sent Moses to lead them out of Egypt into a land of their own. And then God gave them a law. He made them a nation. He was their king. But in the land of Canaan, the Israelites began a long drift away from God. God gave them judges to teach and lead them, but one day the people of God asked for a human king. The last judge of Israel at this time was the prophet Samuel. In 1 Samuel chapter 8 verse 15, it says, "When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, 'You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have.'" People often want to be like everybody else. People want to be popular. The Israelites wanted to be like the nations around them. Perhaps they found it too hard to follow the leadership of an invisible God. Perhaps they got tired of their pagan neighbors always asking them, "Where is your king?" And they would have to say, "He's in heaven." So they wanted an earthly leader, just like the Philistines, the Moabites, etc. And they didn't ask God for a king. They demanded that Samuel appoint this king. Samuel was displeased and he went to prayer. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 7 through 9, it says, "And the Lord told him, 'Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected as their king, but me. And they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know that the king who will reign over them, what he will do.'" And so Samuel told them, "If I give you a king, he'll draft your sons into the army. He'll make them run in front of his chariots as his servants. He'll take your daughters to be his cooks and bakers. He'll take your best fields and vineyards, and he'll take a tenth of your crops for his attendants. The best of everything you have will be for his use. You will, in effect, become his slaves." In verses 19 to 22, it says, "But the people refused to listen to Samuel. 'No,' they said, 'we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with the king to lead us and to go out before us and to fight our battles.' And when Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. And the Lord answered, 'Listen to them and give them a king.' Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, 'Everyone go back to his own town.' So God let them have exactly what they wanted. The people's choice was Saul. That's how people chose. They go for someone who looks good. He'll present a good image. Saul started out great. He was somewhat humble. He was able to gather an army and win victories against the enemies of Israel. He was 40 years old when he began to rule, but along the way, things began to fall apart. Saul proved to be defensive, short-tempered, given to depression and envy, and even thoughts of murder. So much for the People's Choice. People's Choice Award. David was born about 10 years after Saul became king. It was a time of drifting away from God, and disappointed in their chosen leader, their king did not walk with God. So, what does a people do when they have gotten their way, but it turns out wrong? Well, God intervened. During one of Saul's episodes of disobedience, Samuel confronted him. And this is what it says in Psalm 13, verses 13 and 14. Again, "You have acted foolishly," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command of the Lord your God that he gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command." That leader would be David. He would be the Lord's choice. More is written about David than any other Old Testament character. More is written about David than, well, really any other Old Testament character. Jesus would be known as the son of David rather than the son of Abraham, but he is of the line of Abraham and David. On 2 occasions, he is referred to as a man after God's own heart. But if you remember the life of David, he was human. He made mistakes, he committed sins, he had trouble with his children, and he had trouble with his subordinates. Why does God choose someone? What kind of people does God choose and use? Paul had trouble with the way people perceived him. Some of the readers of this letter were Jewish, and they tended to look for a miracle to prove someone was a man of God. Some of his readers were Greeks, and they were looking for appearances, style, oratory skills. Paul tells them that he is not coming to them in a way to accommodate their expectations. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 20 to 23, and chapter 2, verses 1 through 5, it says, "Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world Mhm. For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom is foolishness." I feel like that was a typo. For since For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Okay. Jews demand miraculous signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. When I come to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on men's wisdom, but on God's power. In verse 26 through 29, that tells us how God chooses. It says, "Brothers, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of this world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, and so that no one may boast before him." Now, the new Berkeley version for verses 28 and 29 says, "God also had chosen the world's insignificant and despised people and nobodies in order to bring to nothing those who amount to something, so that nobody may boast in the presence of God." We're a lot like the Greeks. We like impressive people. We like people we can admire. We are swayed by things that are cause for human boasting. We want smart, beautiful people. We want successful people. We are much enamored of surface things. We are impressed by the superficial. But that's not the way that God makes his choices. God sometimes chooses nobodies and turns them into somebodies. That was the case with David. Tall, handsome Saul was the people's choice. The young shepherd David was God's choice. When God is looking over the earth for potential leaders and vessels and instruments he can use, he's not looking the way we would look. He doesn't start with perfect people. He is looking for people like you and me, but he is looking for certain qualities he found in David. So, what are these qualities? One, he looks for men and women after his own heart. Do you want your life to be in agreement with the will and heart of God? It is what is important to God, or is what is important to God important to you? Do the things that burden the heart of God burden your heart? When God says go this way, do you go that way? When God says get rid of this from your life, do you get rid of it? Do you do what he says is right and refuse to do what he says is wrong? Do you honestly come to terms with yourself because you have a heart for God? In 2 Corinthians chapter 16 verse 9 it says, "For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him." So what is God looking for? Men and women whose hearts are completely his. No locked doors on their hearts. Admit when are wrong and stop doing it. They're grieved over their wrongs and over other they are grieved over wrong. They are concerned about the things that displease God because they want to please him. And they have right motives. Those are the men and women whose hearts are completely his. Another thing he looks for is humility. In 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 1 talks about David had a servant's heart, faithfully kept his father's sheep. And in Psalm 78, verses 70 to 72, he chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheep pens, from tending the sheep. He brought him to be the shepherd of his people, Jacob, of Israel, his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them. In Psalm chapter 89, verse 20, it says, "I have found David my servant, with my sacred oil I have anointed him." God doesn't look for slick public images. He looks for that one with character. God provides the image. God doesn't look for charisma, size, or impressive track records. He cares about character, integrity, genuineness. Is a person real, or is he or she faking it? He looks for the servant's heart. Someone who has a servant's heart is humble, does what they are told. They're not rebellious. They respect who is in charge, and in this case, it's God. Serves faithfully and quietly. God watched David out in the fields and hills, keeping his father's sheep, faithfully, doing what his father's bidding was, and God chose him. A servant doesn't care who gets the glory. A servant's one goal is to make the person he or she serves look good. They do not want the person they serve to fail, so they don't look for credit. They just want to get the job done. Another thing they look for, or that God looks for, is integrity. In Psalm 78, verse 72, it says, "And David shepherded them with integrity of heart." Integrity is to be complete, whole, innocent, having simplicity of life, wholesome, sound, unimpaired. Integrity is what you are when no one is looking. Integrity is being absolutely real and honest. In today's world, we are taught that making a good impression is all that matters. Not so with real men and women of God. Our goal is not to fake it. God is not impressed with externals. He cares about what is on the inside. Perhaps if you lived back then, you would have wondered why God chose a shepherd boy to be a king. Perhaps you would have doubted Jesus' wisdom in choosing zealots, tax collectors, and fishermen to be the first leaders of his church. Perhaps you think God can't choose you. God has a purpose for you. He has a plan for you in his kingdom, in his church. Don't think you have to make yourself somebody first. Say yes to God, and he will train you for his use. He did with Moses, David, Peter, Paul, Timothy, and many others down through the centuries. Father, thank you that you have given us David to learn from. Thank you for choosing a simple shepherd boy with a heart of integrity who is chasing after you to be a king that we can look to learn how to live our own lives. Thank you that even though he was flawed, you chose him. So we are able to look at his life and see how many times he messed up. And know that it doesn't matter how many times we mess up, that you choose us to. Lead us in your ways, direct us down your paths. Use our lives, Father. Help us to give our lives completely to you, to your use, to introduce others to you so that they can have you as their best friend too. In the name of Jesus, your holy Son, who sacrificed for us, we pray. Amen.